Hello there, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Star Trek Reviews. This is my review for Star Trek Lower Decks, Season 2, Episode 9, wej Duj. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's Klingon, I guess. I do love how the title is written in Klingon at the beginning of the episode. It's great. So before I dive into it, I guess I'm obligated to do a spoiler warning. You know, if you haven't seen it yet, blah, blah, blah. Why would you click on it? See, I'm not really in favor of spoiler warnings because I feel like every YouTube video has spoilers unless they specifically say it's spoiler free. But I don't know, I still feel under some obligation to say spoiler warning, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, now let us dive right into the spoilers. Let's jump into this episode. So first I want to start by amending something that I said about last week's episode. So last week I said that I wished every episode of Lower Decks could be like that one. This week's episode kind of proved me wrong because this week Lower Decks showed me that they can put out a fantastic episode without having to rely on rollover barrel laughing and, you know, reference after reference after reference, which was fantastic. And I still want to see more episodes like last week's episode. That was so good, last week's episode. But I guess I'm realizing that Lower Decks is a much more versatile show than I gave it credit for, that it is able to deliver a different type of humor and still be funny. This week was a much more subtle form of humor. It wasn't like just rolling over laughing. It wasn't relying on references. It was more of a intelligent humor, I guess, for lack of a better term, like something that you have to stop and think about for a split second, like, oh. And then it's like, once you get it, it's ingenious. Like, there was just a lot of that in this episode. And just a lot of little small references and callbacks that were very subtle. This episode was almost perfection. But I would still actually say that it is not quite as good as last week's episode. And the reason why is because there is one of the storylines that unfortunately had to go and rely on another bad sitcom trope. I hate it when they do that. There was an episode earlier this year, I forget if it was 5 or 6, the one with Rutherford and Boimler thinking that Mariner was evil or whatever, and there was the comic misunderstanding and whatever. But Lower Decks, unfortunately, this season has used sitcom tropes. That one was the worst one, that episode I'm talking about. This one wasn't too bad because it was kind of more of a minor plot. It wasn't like the whole focus of the episode like it was in that other episode I was just talking about. And I actually did like the resolution of that particular storyline. I'm talking about the Boimler storyline, but I'll get into that in more detail in just a bit. But because of that, I can't say that it is quite on the same level as last week's episode, but it is close, but for completely different reasons. It's a completely different type of episode, so I just love that Lower Decks is now showing me how versatile it is, that it can have the just, you know, knock your socks off, make you roll on the floor laughing with reference after reference after reference episode, and then come out with something like this, with just brilliant. I mean, you're going to hear me probably say genius and brilliant a lot in this review, because it's just brilliant humor and brilliant storytelling, not just with the humor, but the story that they tell in this episode is just brilliant in this episode. If not for that stupid sitcom plot that they had to throw in there, this would be absolute perfection. But it's not quite perfection because of that. Anyways, let's go ahead and start getting into the details of this episode. So like with last week's episode, I had to think a bit about how to format this review because it does not follow the simple formula that other episodes do, where you have Boimler and Mariner over here and Rutherford and Tindy over here, and sometimes this year they were mixing up a little bit and putting Mariner and Tindy together and Rutherford and Boimler together and things like that, which is good. But the fact that they are breaking away from that format is part of the reason why I really love these past two episodes. I love that they're breaking out and doing completely different things and not being stuck in the old format. This is fantastic. I love that. But it also makes it difficult for me to figure out how I'm going to break down my review. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through, I'll go through the Boimler storyline, I'll go through the Vulcan storyline, I'll go through the Klingon storyline, maybe not in that order. And then at the end, I will cover that ending scene where they all kind of come together. So I think that's kind of the best way to go about that. So let's go ahead and start with the Boimler storyline, which is my least favorite storyline. And I guess I'll call it the Cerrito storyline because there's also a touch of Freeman and Mariner stuff in there as well, so I'll just throw that into this. So I guess it's more of the Cerrito storyline, but it does focus mostly on Boimler. And there are some funny moments within this. I love when he is trying to connect with Kayshawn and is accidentally calling him fat. That was pretty good. I actually did not catch the Star Trek V reference. I saw it in another video. But to be quite honest, I have not seen Star Trek V in like 20 years, quite intentionally so, because that's such a terrible movie, and I just don't have any reason to revisit it. But there is this scene where Boimler goes into the holodeck, and Dr. Katana and Tindy are climbing the rocks, and Boimler comes up with the what do you call those things? Jet boots. And I guess that was from Star Trek V when Spock did that. And once somebody pointed that out, I was like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that. But Star Trek V, not my thing. So I don't really care about it. But I guess that was a parody of Star Trek V. However, the whole concept of Boimler wanting to snuggle up to bridge crew, not only was it sitcom-y, but also a huge step backwards in his character development. A giant step. I thought he was past this. I thought that was a season 1 Boimler thing. So I did not like any of that, although there were some amusing moments within it. And the whole thing about him lying about being from Hawaii was insanely, ridiculously, horribly sitcom-y. Like, that is the most... They might as well have been Three's Company. I said that about the other episode, too. Episode 5 or 6 or whatever that was. Might as well have been freaking Three's Company. I mean, come on! Come on! Why? Why do you do this to me? So I did not like that. However, I kind of did like the resolution where it turns out they're all from the moon instead of Hawaii. And then they're like, oh, you insulted us moon goers by pretending that Odessa, California is a moon. and Boy was like, but you were just lying about being from Hawaii. And so that was pretty funny. And I love that one of the people who said he was from Hawaii is, I believe their race is called Benzite, if I remember correctly. Please correct me in the comments. It's something along those lines. They appeared a couple times in the first seasons of The Next Generation. Actually, I think one was in the first season, one was in the second season, maybe. There was a dude who was like a friend of Wesley or whatever. They were bad episodes, I don't remember, but it was that species. So I think it's hilarious that he was saying he was from Hawaii. I mean, I suppose that alien races are settling on Earth now, and so it would be the same as, any other immigrant saying that they're from a state in the United States or whatever today. So I guess that does kind of make sense, but it's still, I thought, was kind of funny that because it seems like he's pretty obviously not from Hawaii. So the fact that they were all from the moon, and then Boimler pointed out that they had just lied about Hawaii, I did like that. And I also like the resolution that Boimler decided he didn't need this. I still feel like he figured that out last season, but whatever. That still seems backwards to me, like a backwards character development. But ultimately, it doesn't hurt this episode too much. It's just my one gripe, but everything else is just so brilliant and ingenious that it's really a minor blip in the whole thing. And yeah, we did get a little bit of Mariner and Freeman, and I kind of liked that they were arguing the whole time, and then in the end, we were just like, I really enjoyed myself. And Mariner was like, yeah, I did too. That was sweet. I thought that was really sweet. That's just how certain relationships go, especially mother and daughter relationships sometimes, just or sister relationships or brother and sister relationships. That happens sometimes, and that's how you show your love for each other. You just bicker and argue the whole time. Bicker and argue the whole time. So I actually thought that was kind of sweet. It was very minor. This was not like really a big part of this episode, but I kind of like that part of it. But anyways, the Cerritos is actually my least favorite storyline. So let's move into the good stuff now. All right, I think I'm going to go into the Klingon one next because I want to save the best for last. But first, I do kind of want to backtrack a bit and talk about this format because I love how they transitioned from each storyline at the beginning. First, which is a throwaway line with Boimler saying, oh, well, I wonder what it's like on a Klingon ship. And they go to the Klingon ship, and then it says Klingon lower decks. And honestly, I thought it was a one-time gag. I thought we were going to get one scene with a cheap gag with Klingon lower decks. That was going to be the end of it. When they started spending more time with these Klingons, at first I was like, we don't know these characters. This is weird. And then when they went over to the Vulcan ship, which was also a great transition with the Klingon saying, oh, well, it's not logical for the Klingon Empire to behave this way. And they were like, logical? What are you, a Vulcan? And then they go over to the Vulcan ship. I thought those transitions were brilliant. They were brilliant. So when they started doing this, I was skeptical at first. But by the end of it, I was blown away. I thought this way of storytelling was phenomenal. And I am just impressed how they got us attached to these characters within a half hour. So first focusing on the Klingons. So you have this Klingon who is very much paralleling Boimler, especially in the way that he's always trying to impress the captain and suck up to him. And I guess maybe that is why they had to have the Boimler storyline the way they had it to really highlight those parallels, even though I still feel like that's more season 1 Boimler. But because we're not going to be following this Klingon presumably, a whole lot, I have a feeling we may see him again, but we're not going to be following him a whole lot. They kind of, sped up Boimler's storyline. So Boimler's not gotten to the part yet where he becomes a captain. Now, obviously, Boimler is a Starfleet officer. He's not going to kill Captain Freeman, but it's a little different. But it's not about the killing the captain and becoming captain. It's more about the coming of his own and gaining that confidence and not just being a lower decker anymore, which is where Boimler is heading. That's the trajectory he's on. I've talked about that the last few weeks. So this Klingon has that same storyline, but it's condensed greatly because Boimler's storyline will be spread out over however many seasons there are, and this was like within 30 minutes. So a much more sped up, much more condensed version of Boimler's storyline, but in Klingon, and I freaking loved it. I like that he was able to find it within himself to stand up to the captain because he had always sucked up to them sucked up to him, and he was like, this is not the Klingon way. And he's absolutely right. This Klingon was not following the Klingon way. He absolutely was not behaving with honor. Worf would be proud of this lower deck guy, because Worf would also tell this Klingon captain that he was not behaving with honor. And what I really loved the irony in that when they were fighting, the Targ bit the captain. I don't know if everyone saw it this way, but what I read out of that is that the captain thought of, taking care of the Targ as this menial duty that he passed off to this, wimpy lower decks guy, who he called small and skinny or whatever he said to him, and thought he was never going to amount to anything. So taking care of the Targ was thought of as the most menial, just demeaning task. And yet, because he did that, he developed a bond with this Targ, who liked him better than the captain and took his side in the fight. Ingenious, brilliant. Absolutely. Love that. And by the way, we get a reveal here that the Klingons have been providing weapons to the Pakleds this whole time. Believe it or not, Lower Decks has a little bit of a serialized storyline going on here with the Pakleds, and we had a pretty significant reveal in that storyline, is that this particular, rogue Klingon captain, who definitely is not in line with the High Council, and he even says so himself, he's been dealing weapons to the Pakleds, and the Pakled scenes were funny once again, and they had the Pakled Lower Decks too, where they were like, red alarm, red alarm, and how the Pakled was like, we tested out the bomb, but then it didn't work again. And the Klingon captain was like, it's a bomb! It only works once! And I've said this before, but I do love that in a show about Lower Decks on a ship that is Lower Decks in Starfleet, I love that the main villain is some throwaway villain from season 2 of Star Trek that most people, Next Generation, that most people hated, and were just really dumb, a dumb species. I love how they've turned the tables and made the Pakleds into the main villain for Lower Decks, and it's appropriate. I love it. Anyways, that's the Klingon storyline. So now I'm going to talk about my favorite storyline, which is the Vulcan storyline. Okay, let's get into the Vulcan storyline, because I love this one. It was so masterfully done. So we're kind of following our Lower Decks. There's a lot of parallels to our Lower Decks, but in Vulcans. And by the way, they did do that with the Klingons too, but I think even more so with the Vulcan storyline, because in the Klingon storyline, we mostly followed that one dude after the opening scene. And here we do get some of the other Lower Decks Vulcans throughout this. And there's a lot of very subtle parallels, but they're acting like Vulcans, which makes it perfect. I mean, they just masterfully pull it off, because there is a delicate balance that you have to find in doing this, and they just found it. So we're following a Vulcan ensign called T'Lyn, I think her name was, or something along those lines, T'Lyn. And essentially she is Mariner. And in fact, in the scene where she goes into the meditation room, just the way the lighting was, it looked like her skin was a little bit darker, and she looked like Mariner, and the way she was drawn was even like Mariner. And I even thought that perhaps Tawny Newsome was even voicing this character, but then I looked it up. It's a different person, which is good, because you don't want to go overboard with this and make it too much like Mariner, because that would be going too far. But I think they really walked that line nicely. They walked that tightrope to where it was subtly like Mariner, but not too much like Mariner. But she uses some of Mariner's lines, like she says that she wants to be their Chadich, which is what Mariner said to Boimler. I think that was in season 1. And there's a couple other ones I'm forgetting that are callbacks to Mariner's lines. But she's a Vulcan, and she's very much acts like a Vulcan, except that she uses words like feeling, gut instinct, intuition, and this is where the subtle humor really comes in. This is where I am just cracking up, but but it's just more subtle. How they kept telling her that she's having these outbursts. These outbursts will not be tolerated. But it is not logical for you. But it's just hilarious what the Vulcans are calling outbursts. And she truly is the Vulcan version of Mariner to a T. And I just thought it was brilliantly pulled off. And again, like with this Klingon storyline, this is a really good character story that they are able to tell in a 30-minute episode. And with this particular storyline, way less than 30 minutes, like probably like 10 or 12 minutes for this storyline. And it's brilliant the way they're able to tell this story. And you really empathize with this character, probably a lot more so than you do with Mariner. I think Mariner sometimes can take it too far. And sometimes you're like, okay, I think Mariner was sort of a bitch in that situation. Whereas here, the captain of the Vulcan ship is a dick. And you know what? I am not going to fault this particular episode for having a Vulcan captain who is a dick, because I think Vulcans a lot of times are just assholes. They are. Like, they're supposedly, free from emotion, but a lot of times they are just complete assholes. And that is the case here, as you follow this character who was right, and she was proven that her gut instinct was correct, and she was absolutely right, and then is still dismissed by her captain, which was bullshit. And I think they are setting up for her to join the Cerritos, maybe? Because in the end, the captain's like, well, you're going to be punished by being sent off to a human ship. So, as Desmond used to say on Lost, it don't work like that. It doesn't work like that. Vulcans have to go through Starfleet Academy. This is not Enterprise times. You're not going to have T'Pol go on a Starfleet ship. Vulcans got to go through Starfleet Academy. So I'm very curious about what that's about. Like, how can she just be sent to a human ship? Maybe they'll have a good explanation for it when it happens. I'm skeptical because we already have a Mariner. So what's Vulcan Mariner going to be like if they do put her on the Cerritos? So I'm skeptical, but I'm open-minded. I'm very curious if that is indeed what they're going for. I mean, why else would they have that line that she needs to go on a human ship other than she's going to be on the Cerritos? So I'm curious. We'll see how they can pull this off. But I think actually my favorite part of this was at the end, after the asshole captain tells her that she's being sent off to a human ship. This is brilliant. The way that she goes, live long and prosper, was the Vulcan version of fuck off or go fuck yourself. I mean, and it was so perfectly done because there's a way to overdo that and there's a way to underdo that. If they had exaggerated it too much, like if she was like, live long and prosper, bitch, then it would have just been like, that's completely out of character. Because even though she's been shown to be a more emotional Vulcan than the other ones, she's still very much a Vulcan. So anything like that would have been over the top. So it was just the perfect amount of sarcasm where she doesn't leave the realm of being a Vulcan, but you get the message loud and clear. That was the Vulcan way of saying, go to hell, motherfucker. Like, it was so good. It was so good. That's probably my favorite part of the episode because it's just so subtle and so brilliantly done. Like, it was perfect. So now let's talk a little bit more about that ending scene where they kind of tie all things together, where we have the Vulcans, the Klingons, and the Cerritos, and the Pakleds all come together. And I have to love the fact that since they were all kind of on vacation, I think you gotta stretch, you gotta suspend some disbelief a little bit to accept that everybody was on vacation. I mean, somebody's got to run the ship, but it was hilarious that they're all wearing these different costumes. Because I think the Trill who Rutherford went out with, who I should figure out what her name is, because she seems to be the regular helms person now. She was wearing like earmuffs and like they all had these different outfits. I think if I remember, Shax might have had the chef outfit on, and all of that. And then Captain Freeman had a shirt that is in the same style as the real life shirts that say disco on it, but it says Ritos. I can guarantee you that will be on sale very shortly if it's not on sale right now. I'm not really a t-shirt person anymore, so I probably won't buy it, but I think the concept is cool. And I'm sure those shirts will exist. The Ritos, that was really funny, but I thought it was hilarious that they were all wearing these different costumes and stuff, and they had to come together at the last minute. And it really, it shows. I liked it. Even though the Cerritos has been shown to be the lower decks of Starfleet, the crew really can come together and do good things, and I think they did in this episode as well. And I loved the fact that once the Klingon lower deck takes over, it's like, this is not the Klingon way, and takes off, that Captain Freeman is starting to, she doesn't know what's happening, but she's like, yeah, I'm going to talk to Starfleet about this. We're going to piece this together. So, as I said before, very subtly, Lower Decks has become they have a little bit of a serialized thread going. And I'm actually interested in it. I want to know. What is going to become of this? Of course, that Klingon captain is dead, so there's not a whole lot they can do with that. But I do feel like this is going to be followed up on in some way. And at the end, though, I guess one minor complaint would be I thought that the Vulcan's behavior toward Captain Freeman was a little bit exaggerated. That's like Star Trek Enterprise level Vulcan behavior, where there's like, there is no need for us to talk anymore. Bye. I feel like they would have shared information at least. But that's fine. But overall, I loved how they tied everything together, how all the ships that we had been following came together. It was so, get ready, brilliant. It was so brilliant how they just so nicely, neatly tied all the story threads together at the end. God, this episode was really good. I really wish they didn't have to ruin it with that stupid sitcom trope. So now, let me go ahead and give my rating for the episode out of 10. So each week I give a rating with 1 being the lowest possible score, 10 being the highest possible score. And I will give a rating for Season 1, Episode 9, or Season 2, Episode 9, I should say, of Lower Decks. I will give a rating of 9. This was almost a perfect episode. The Boimler thing pulls it down from a 10 to a 9, unfortunately. But this is such an excellent episode. And I would say a revolutionary episode for me, in that it shows me that Lower Decks is capable of so much more than I ever gave it credit for. So I will no longer say that I want every episode to be like Episode 8. I want more episodes like Episode 8, but I want more episodes like this, and then I want them to start showing me more versatility. I want more new things. I want more brilliance in different ways. They've got my expectations up a little higher now, because now I know that they can really expand their horizons. So nothing is off the table for season 3. So I'm really excited about the future of this show after this episode. This episode has really opened up a lot of doors for this show. And I'm really super excited about it. Even though it's a 9 and not quite a 10 because of the stupid sitcom trope, I still think, just taking a step back and looking at the impact that it has on the series, it's a very positive one. So I'm very excited about that. All right, so that is it for my review for Season 2, Episode 9. I'm not going to try to pronounce the title again. I will see you next week for my review of the season finale, which I am super excited for. And then at some point in the future of that, my brother and I, Mark, my brother from Enchantment of Eternity, and maybe Don Willie, I'm not sure yet, will do a discussion of the whole season, and the date and time and channel of that will be announced later. So if you have not already, please subscribe, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.